Hi everyone, my name is Zoe and I'm a fifth-year senior in mechanical engineering. My honors capstone project worked on integrating virtual reality, or VR, into the classroom experience, specifically focusing on the first design and manufacturing course in the ME curriculum, which is ME 250. A little bit of background about the ME 250 course, alongside introducing students to the whole world of design and manufacturing. ME 250 also walks through an introductory training of all of the machine shop tools in the ME machine shop. This training specifically is an oral walkthrough of all of the tools, and then this oral walkthrough is normally paired with a small project that utilizes both the Bridgeport mill and the lathe. Due to COVID, this oral walkthrough and small project combination have been kind of condensed into one PDF file that students can read through, but there is no physical walkthrough of the machine shop, and there is no small project. The main motivation or inspiration for this project was actually my own experience going through ME 250 and then later ME 350, because I felt a huge amount of anxiety over this oral walkthrough and then immediately having access to all of the tools. Even though I had used many machine shop tools during my high school years, just the 1 year that I was off during my first year of college caused me to forget so much about tools, and I was really anxious about just using the tools after just an oral walkthrough. And then after talking to many of my peers, I've noticed that this was not just a single occurrence with me, and that a lot of my peers also felt the same anxiety over just being able to use the tools with very little practice. So I really wanted to provide an alternate resource for students to train. If they wanted to use it in a private space, that would be totally fine. But really, it was an opportunity for students to, practice on their own outside of the physical space in the machine shop, and it would allow them to, break the tool, mess up as many times as they needed, without costing the university money for broken tools, or without taking up space in the machine shop, because there are only so many tools that we have access to there. I figured this would also be a great resource for students who are going through the second and third courses of design and manufacturing in ME, which is ME 350 and ME 450. The students who take these courses can use this resource as a review opportunity or just an opportunity to refresh what they know about the tool, to minimize those mistakes that we can make in the machine shop. So some of the objectives that I had before even starting this project was that I really wanted to make the Bridgeport mill model in VR as realistic as possible, so that there wasn't a shock that students would experience going from the VR mill to the physical mill in the shop. And after working with a few other people in the X50 space, I decided that the best way to showcase all of this information would be through a series of quests or like challenge areas that the user could walk through. The user could probably use this as an instructional aid, or alternatively, they could use it as I mentioned before, like a challenge, to see if they still remember all the things that they learned. I decided to focus on 4 key quests as part of this project, mostly working on the Bridgeport mill, like the main movements that students will do. These included the movement of the Bridgeport mill table in the X, Y, and Z directions, because that's how we move all of our tools to make things. And then the 4th quest I was thinking of was the ability for users or students to change the gear in the Bridgeport mill, because this is something that actually has a process to it, and many students, including myself, often forget how to do this. And then lastly, I wanted to kind of take all these key quests and turn it into a VR experience, kind of like a beta test that could be tested within the current class of ME 250. And then we could get feedback from them to figure out what is good, what needs to change, or if this is an experience that we need to develop or like completely disregard for the future. So my approach for this whole project was mainly focusing on the user experience. So I really wanted to work on the quests. And so in order to focus all of my time on the quests, I ended up downloading a pre-existing Bridgeport mill model. If I could go back and do it all again, I probably would have spent a little bit of time before I started the quests actually building a Bridgeport Mill model of my own, because I found that it was really challenging to use something that someone else had made, because I didn't know all of the details of that mill model, and so it actually became harder to like disassemble it and like set it up the way I needed it to be, where it probably would have been equally as challenging but better in the long run for me to have built it from the ground up. So then when I went actually like worked on the quests, the first thing I did was storyboarding. One of my storyboards you can see on the screen here, I basically had a starting point and an ending point, and then each of my panels kind of represents what would happen when an actionable item or when an action took place. So this includes like if a student or a user interacted with the mill, what would happen? If a user interacted with the 3D space around them, what would happen? And if the user interacted with the user interface, which is where they would see all the prompts and kind of direction for their challenge, what would happen when they interacted with that? So once I had my storyboards, I developed those quests within Unity and kind of tried to develop a world there. So this is a representation of what happened over the course of the project. On the far left, this is the physical mill that is in the machine shop in GG Brown. You can see that it has a whole bunch of visual callouts that aren't really necessary for the 4 quests, but this is the ideal representation that I want in VR, so that the student doesn't have that shock of moving from 2 starkly different mills between experiences. The mill that is currently in the VR space is this middle model. It's very simple. You can see that it doesn't have a lot of those visual callouts. And there are only 4 elements of this mill that the user can actually interact with. And those are the 3 handles for X, Y, and Z movement, and then a lever at the top that will represent the lever for gear change. I found that it was actually really challenging to develop the user interface with a complicated like mill structure. So when I worked on the user interface, I actually created a new mill out of just very geometric shapes that kind of just resembled the mill. But the user interface is that text box that you can see on the right, and it will display the prompts for the challenge, as well as information if the user were to mess up or need assistance moving forward in a quest. So I learned that I wasn't able to really complete a lot of, or like the end of my project because COVID sent us all home and I lost access to the lab that I was using to do this. So a lot of the quests have been developed as far as I can develop them at home, but I need access to the Oculus Rift and a few other pieces of hardware for the whole experience to come together before we can test it in the ME250 class. And so that kind of leads into the future work. Before we can really test it, we need to update the Bridgeport Mill model to reflect all of those visual aids that students will see in VR that kind of reflect the physical mill in the machine shop, as well as integrating the Oculus Rift headset and handsets. This is specifically important because right now all the code will only respond to inputs on the mouse and the keyboard, but we need it to correspond to the handset inputs, and so that will require a lot of changing. And then lastly, we need to create a room or some environment around the mill in VR space because it can be very nauseating for a user to kind of use a mill that's just floating in an endless void. And then lastly, once all of those little integrations have taken place, we want to do a trial run with just these 4 quests within ME250 and to get feedback whether or not they think it was worth it, what needs to change to move forward, and then kind of build up this model and this quest development before we move on to another tool in the machine shop. I want to thank Mike Umbriak for letting me work within the scope of ME250 and really getting me involved with this project. And then I want to thank Dr. Kanate Asibu for advising me during ME490, which is where I learned and really focused on all the VR stuff. And then Talal Alothman for assisting me with all things Unity and Oculus, because I had to learn all of it very quickly. Thanks for watching.